Split screen now.
Are we sharing the audio?
Is there no audio?
No audio on my end.
Pots, just do the tab, Dave. It doesn't do window correctly.
Yo, what's going on, guys? We will be right with you.
Just go back to how it was. Do it only tab, not window.
We'll be right with you.
Remove that. Yep.
We have technical difficulties. What up? We're back. We're here. So, you know what? Before we start off, I want us to look at a few videos, okay, about servant leadership. Here we go.
Paul, thanks again for being with us. I want to ask you about biblical masculinity. The idea of biblical masculinity is disappearing in today's culture, and yet we see that it is so important as we look at the scripture. Yes. Talk to me about biblical masculinity and why it's so important.
Well, first of all, there is a difference between a man and a woman. I know that in today that's shocking, but Paul told the Corinthians, act like men. There had to be a basis for that. But here's what we need to understand. Let's say that my father's generation, and for the most part, my generation, the idea of being a man was John Wayne. Mm-hmm. Okay. And if you watch some of the John Wayne movies, there was a lot of things noble about that, but there were a lot of things that weren't noble. So John Wayne and that type of thing isn't the model, the archetype of what a man is to be. Mm-hmm. And then if you go to the other extreme, which you seem to find today, it's the very opposite of that person. Mm-hmm. A very passive, delicate man, a fearful man. It's like his psyche is broken, mm-hmm. and he just crumbles. Part of that we need to realize is one aspect of the judgment of God. Isaiah 3 is very clear about that we have young men ruling over older men. Noble men are removed from society. And there's all sorts of things revealed there in Isaiah 3. What we've got to realize is this. Our main problem is simply, again, not studying the Bible. Our main problem is not looking at Christ, or looking at Christ through some filtered lens rather than the raw scripture. My desire is not to be like John Wayne. It's also not to be like the other extreme. I want to set my sights on being like Jesus Christ. Now, also, I need to think about something. There is a headship in the family, and I am to my home. That doesn't mean that everything revolves around me. My headship serves one purpose, that I lead my home for the benefit of my wife and children, no matter how costly it is to me. My headship is sacrificial. And one of the things about being a true man, if we look at the model of Christ, it is self-giving and self-sacrifice. It's always, look at what Christ did. He gave himself and gave himself and gave himself until there was nothing left to give. That is my responsibility to my wife and my children. Also, if you want to talk about Christ is our protector, he stood in front of us. He stood in front of his bride. Anyone wants to come to get his bride, anyone wants to come to get God's children, he's going to stand between them and the ones he loves. This requires strength, courage. I think that
next
young
video
men need to grow.
Yeah.
All right.
Do you guys hear all that?
You're hearing it fine?
Do you guys hear all that?
Yeah.
Like, no, your desires. Nope.
I mean, it's definitely not going to sell men on marriage, that idea.
Like, no, your desires is a no. Oh, yeah. This guy.
Let's play this one.
I am primarily provoked in spirit, and don't get offended, ladies, by our men. Like, why are men going to bed these days with so much energy? That's not what God designed. God designed you to go to bed tired. Why are you going to bed so strong?
So work out.
We work hard at work for the glory of God. We pull into our driveway. We say a prayer. We go into the house. We love and serve mama. Because the Bible is put on our shoulders by the Holy Spirit of God, that our wives would look like well-watered vines, that they would grow in their gifting, that they would feel cherished and loved. And we get on the floor and we play with our kids, and we tuck them in bed and we pray and we lead out spiritually in our homes. And then when everybody's down, we sit with mama some more, check on her heart, pray, and then go to bed exhausted, wrung out for the kingdom of God. But that's not how so many men are going to bed. We got tons of energy, right? And it's why so many of you are getting yourselves so jammed up, because God has not designed you for a bunch of free time. He's created you to make war, and you're punting on that. And a bored man is a dangerous man.
I agree with that.
Now, gosh,
Bored
no,
man is a dangerous man.
See, what this weight does is push you into Jesus. Listen, sometimes I pull up in the drive and I'm just exhausted and I feel like I earned some couch time. Final Fours once a year. Get off me, woman. Right? I feel like I earned that. So here's what has to happen. I have to pull into the driveway. I have to ask the Holy Spirit for strength. I have to breathe, open up the car door, walk in, ask how I can serve, not measure what she's done today versus what I've done today. Figure out how I can serve her. Check on the hearts of my children, which, that God would just command us to take care of their behavior. How easy would that be? But to shepherd hearts, I have 2 girls. You know how complex that is? I'm still trying to figure out the one I'm married to. Now I've got little ones.
Not my problem.
Boo, I don't know. All right, you got to take this. She's crying. I don't even know why. My son doesn't do that. He furrows his brow and wants to fight. She's just sobbing. Help me. Someone else. Flare. Need estrogen in here in a hurry.
He's taking it.
And then I'm going to tuck them in their beds. We're going to pray. And then I'm going to sit down with Lauren and check on her heart. I'm going to go to bed tired. There's no room in there for dumb stuff that jams men up.
Yeah, dumb stuff. Don't take care of yourself, guys, because that's dumb. Don't unwind. Don't have.
Imagine telling that the guy who's like laying bricks all day long.
Yeah.
Before we dive into Ezekiel 37, let's chat. If you remember, when we started Manhood a couple of weeks ago, I said, need really 2 things for you or from you, or really here are the 2 ways that you really need to be engaged in this conversation about manhood and what manhood is. There's really 2 parts that you play as we flesh this out. The first is expectation, that as we walk through what the Word of God says about biblical manhood, that your expectations of men should rise, all right? The bar should be raised as you hear, this is what God says a man is, and so the bar should raise. Listen to me. Men will rise to the occasion if the bar is high enough. You set it low, you'll find some moron running in a herd of other morons who steps over that tiny little bar you have. You're more valuable than that, remember?
But how dare you men have a damn expectation on women?
Get a cat. Because that cat will not cause you the heartbreak that some boy who can shave will. Don't treat yourself so cheaply. So expectation should increase as you hear and learn what biblical manhood is. And then as members of the covenant community, your role is to not just expect, but to encourage men in this. And encourage men in this. Wives, encourage your man. We'll talk more about this later. Speak life in him. Where you see him doing these things on the way home, you should be, baby, I thank you for how you're trying to lead in these things. I see you working at this. Thank you so much for how you've filled this space, how you've kind of engaged our children like this, how you pursued my heart like this, how you manage things so well. Thank you, baby. Encourage. And then single women, encourage our single men to be these things. In fact, if they're pursuing you and they're a boy who you can share, I'm just straight up permission from Pastor Matt to go, well, once you grow into your body, we can have this conversation. But for now, I'd rather stay at home with my cat than go out with you. All right? So I just lay it down. You expect those boys to grow up, and I think you'll be surprised at them going, oh, dang, I need to grow up.
All right, let's end it there.
Hello, lobsters. If you've ever read 12
Yo,
We
Wow.
are back.
we're back. Hey guys, did you guys like that horrible theological lesson on?
We're just gonna
on
end it
manhood?
there. We're just ending it there.
Yeah, that's it. It's a wrap,
Take
guys.
take
Have a good
what you
night.
want out of that. Wrapping it up.
Mike,
So Glenn, what stirred on this conversation?
what stirred up this conversation?
Yeah, why are we going here?
Because these women. No, I'm kidding. So I follow Aaron Wren on Substack, and I also follow him on his podcast. And he came out with the Substack talking about the servant leader model. You know, hey James, you know what? At least you got to take a shower during my ninja time. All right. So thank God you washed yourself. You had to come into this podcast cleansed. All right. I'll be coming into this podcast smelling. You can't be sitting at home watching this stinking. You have too much energy. You're not watching this tired. You need to watch this tired. But so Aaron Wren came up with this blog, and he was systematically breaking down the problem with servant leader model, that I think he was able to put it in better words than I could articulate. And as like most mornings throughout the week, me and Mike message each other. Okay. And we're talking, and I'm like, yo, check this out. And I was like, yo, we should do a topic on this. We should do a show on this. And that's kind of how we got here. Now, I will say this to you guys. There is a part 2. There will be a part 2 to this show. It'll probably be in a couple weeks. And we have Pastor Joel Webman from Right Response Ministries going to partake in this conversation. Full disclosure, I also, for tonight, I sent the link to Ruslan. I doubt he'll go join us. I really do. But he and I have corresponded on this conversation today, you know, but I doubt he'll come on. But you know, it was a good friend, a good conversation.
So you want to pull up that comment from JR, because he brought up a good point with this. Scroll up a little bit. Yeah, pull that comment up. So to the untrained ear, all of what they're saying is a Christian standard. It takes a while to be able to point out what is wrong with what they're saying. So I think he's kind of right. Like a brand new Christian is going to hear, you know, those talks, and especially women, they'd be like, yes, amen. So,
yeah.
So what, you know, where's the nuance in this, Glenn? Where's this going wrong?
So this is a one-sided conversation, what they're doing. Now, I'm not saying husbands, you're not supposed to, like, you know, care for your wife, provide for your wife, tend to your wife's, you know, needs, you know. I'm not saying that you aren't supposed to consider her, you know, her feelings and her you know, her thoughts on matters. The problem with servant leadership model, in my eyes, it's not leadership, it's servant, which is slavery. There's a couple of questions that Aaron Rand points out in the blog that we're going to pull up here in a minute, but he says, who determines what service is provided, what servant is provided, and to whom? And then who measures whether or not the man is being a good enough servant leader?
Yeah. And I think
When we say like, oh, you need to be a good servant leader, your wife, according to whose standards?
well, they're setting the standard on Jesus, what just seems to me like they're missing a whole side of Jesus. Like I heard a good quote. I can't remember where it's from, but it's this mindset's basically like Jesus is the lion and the lamb, that kind of phrase where you're literally only seeing the lamb side.
Well, they're only talking
Jesus
about the lamb side.
When you look at Jesus's ministry, like if you look at how he treated the church, and this would maybe be a technical question, would you view like the Pharisees as part of the church? Like these are the religious leaders of the day, and how he corrected and treated them. So you have all these examples of Jesus. He's very sacrificial, and I agree men should be that way with their families, but you don't see any of the other side of him disciplining Peter, saying, "Get behind me, Satan," of him.
He disciplined Peter twice, if you remember. Like when Jesus is washing the feet, and I think it's in the article, Jesus is washing the feet, and Peter's like, no, Lord, you're not washing my feet. And Jesus is like, yo, bro, I'm going to wash your feet or you could depart from me.
Mm-hmm.
Like Jesus did as a servant leader, as a leader, Jesus didn't allow the people to tell him how he was going to be a servant to him.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't tell you he didn't ask you, hey, what services do you want me to provide to you? He said, this is how I'm going to lead. This is the service I'm providing to you. He didn't let you have a choice.
Yeah. And if you really I think read behind or read between the lines of what they're stating, is they're using this serve word when it's really seeming like it's totally happy wife, happy life. Like this is exactly what it is. It's all about happiness. Do whatever it takes to make sure your wife and your children are happy. And that is the backbone of it. And we know chasing happiness, how that goes.
Well, it's like, okay, Jesus died for the church. So, you got to, as it says in Ephesians, right? Husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church. Basically, what did Jesus do for the church? Well, he sacrificed his life for the salvation as the ultimate sacrifice for the church. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So basically, I got to at least be willing to die for my wife. If you're looking at it from a literal context, right? Just let's get literal with it, because this is where people take things a little too far. They're like, no, let's just start with the literal. What did Jesus do? He died for the church. He offered himself as the last sacrifice for the church, right? No more burning of on the altar. Jesus was the last sacrifice in the church. So he was willing to die for the love that his bride, the church. Okay. So men, if you're going to marry somebody, you got to be willing to at least die for them. Can we start there? Can we at least say that we have agreement there?
Agreed. Right? I think that
okay.
is, yes.
It also tells us that a man that doesn't provide for his family is worse than a non-believer. Right?
And that's coming from Paul, right?
That's coming from Paul. So we could at least say that a man, as a servant leader or a leader in the household, needs to be willing to die and provide for his family's needs. Now, that's talking about financial needs, but we could read into it and be like, you know what? A good Christian man is also, because the Bible also tells wives, right, to go to your husbands for questions. right? So
Yeah.
now the man has to be proficient enough in the scriptures, in God's word, to be able to articulate to his wife and teach his wife the question she has in the Bible, right?
He should
So
be able
he's
to lead
also,
her spiritually.
he has to be also be a spiritual leader. He has to provide physical, you know, uh, giftings, or not giftings, but he has to provide monetary enough to where he could, financially sustain them, their needs, right? He has to provide security. He has to be willing to die, right? And he has to be able to be proficient and educated enough in the God's word to be a spiritual leader too. So he's providing spiritual leadership, provisions, and defense, right?
Yep.
That's the basics. Can we agree with that? That's the basics.
Totally agree.
Okay. I think anything outside of that is bonus. Right? And
I think you could, like, it's just that's where it's a bit nebulous, because you have to look at Jesus's whole ministry probably with the church and pick apart, like, what is he providing the disciples and the people that come to him. And that's where Chandler is getting his stuff from, and some of these guys were the specific service side of Jesus's ministry, not him like calling out disciplining, calling out the Pharisees, his own disciples. Like, Jesus had a full encompassing personality here, besides just being somebody washing people's feet. Like, he did a lot.
You got to remember, Jesus made a whip and started whipping people in the church, right? Because they were tainting his father's house. Those people were believers, right? Even though they're money changers, they were there for a reason. They could have done some money changing elsewhere. They did it there for a reason, right? So he whooped the people for being disobedient, right? He corrected the Pharisees numerous times and embarrassed them, because they're being disobedient, right? So if you're going to say you need to love your wife like Christ loved the church, then you have to encompass, it's not just the fluffy, feel-good stuff that she likes. It's the discipline that she doesn't like, right? And wives will say this and get real upset and be like, wait a minute, you can't discipline me. Love is discipline.
It's actually not loving too. Like, if you don't discipline your children or lead them, that's not loving them.
That's not loving them. You spare the rod, you spoil the child. Well, you spare the wife, you spoil the wife.
Yeah.
You spare the wife, you ruin the marriage.
And I think it's like, it's not like we're focusing on this concept of disciplining her. It's more so that this is not about happy wife, happy life, like, as the primary source of this whole idea. Like, the other thing is, I was just reading in Revelations, you see all these letters to churches from Jesus in the beginning of Revelations. Like, there's some little bit more going on there than just like washing their feet.
Like, Jesus is like, he comes back and he's bringing a sword, right?
Mm-hmm.
He ain't coming over here to be like, oh, come here, sweet thing. I know you did wrong, but give me a hug.
Well, ultimately, what does Jesus want? Especially when you read Revelations, these letters, he wants to make the church better.
Yeah.
Like, and that ultimately should be what you want for your family. You want to see them grow. You want to lead them spiritually, like, first and foremost, to have their relationships grow. It's not about appeasing all their needs and wants. There's nothing in the Bible that would back that up, especially like from the provider standpoint, like thinking, okay, that means I got to be a provider of like a 4-bedroom, 2,200 square foot house and 2 brand new Mercedes. Otherwise, I'm not doing my role. Like, that's, also nonsense in the expectations a lot of times set today.
Well, it's
that's
also
why,
too, like, okay, let's say you provide all that, right? You're providing that. Well, now you don't have the time to provide the spiritual element of it. You don't have the time to provide the intimate element of it because you're working, 30 hours a day. Okay, not 30 hours, but you're working like 16 to 18 hours a day to provide this lifestyle for this woman, and you're not being able to provide the other elements, which leads her to go find it elsewhere.
Mm-hmm. And
Right?
ultimately, we know if you give everything a woman, or like give a woman everything she wants, she's not happy anyway. She doesn't want that of a man in the long run. But I had a question written down on this topic. What do you think is like leading to this mindset that is so pervasive in the church? Is this just a blanket feminism problem? Is this like a tithing issue? Like we got to fill the seats with women that, pay the bill? What do you think?
Let's go historically here, right? Let's talk about it a little historically. Robert Greenleaf is the first person that came up with servant leader model. Okay. Robert Greenleaf wasn't a Christian. Actually, the way that he wrote it, it had nothing to do with Jesus at all. But in 1970, Robert Greenleaf came up with this model. What was also going on in the 70s? Oh, we're seeing the rise of second wave or third wave feminism, right? Women are complaining about their men, right? All right. So a way to combat this rise of feminism and to appease women, you get the church giving this, this Robert Greenleaf guy wrote this kind of sounds like doesn't he sound like Jesus? This guy sounds like Jesus. So we're going to just put our Christian fish stamp on it and make it Christian kosher and say, this is how men are supposed to lead. Because nowhere, I've done extensive research on this. I have not found a sermon from anybody prior to like the 80s that is promoting servant leader. I think it was a cultural, to combat feminism or to appease women, because there were men acting out, right? But to appease women, they're going to say, this is how a Christian man should be. This is Christ-like enough.
Well, and it absolutely, it's a no-win model, I'd say, for men, because every circumstance of a bad marriage is like you didn't servant lead well enough. You didn't, make your family happy or whatever. Like it seems like just a black hole for men in the end.
It is. And like, we'll pull up the article here in a minute. Let's get through the rest of your questions. But I think when they're promoting this servant leader model, if you want to make men the most disinterested in marriage, Christians are doing this Christian community with the servant leader model. Bravo. You are making more men not want to get married. And to me, like, this is here's Glenn going down a conspiracy hole. It's like overpopulation's a problem, right? Well, let's stop getting Christian people to stop procreating. Let's make marriage sound so disgusting to men that they're not going to want to get married.
Yeah, I mean, I had that written down. It totally removes the motivation for men. Like it would make, let's just say hypothetically, this model is true how it's supposed to be. I would view it then, especially like marriage isn't for every man, because I would say most men can't achieve what this is.
Yeah.
And so that you have that problem. And then I would view it almost like a calling, like as a missionary.
Well,
like
absolutely.
You are signing up for a life of a difficult life. Like you have no authority and all of the servitude over your family. And like, it's just, it seems like that is definitely not how it's supposed to be.
Well, it's also like saying, hey, you have all the responsibility to make your family happy and, satisfy your wife's needs, your kids' needs, your wife's desires, your kids' desires. But how dare you how dare you think that you have a right to have your desires met,
or have authority over them,
or have
like
have authority. And it's like, oh, your relationship failed, it's your fault. Well, my wife cheated on me, your fault. So it's like there's a difference between responsibility and fault. Every man that's in a marriage has the responsibility for that family. Doesn't mean he's at fault all the time. So you have a responsibility to act. Your wife cheats on you, you have the responsibility to act. The act could be, I'm divorcing her, or I'm going to forgive her, and I'm going to work on this. That's the responsibility. You have a responsibility of an action. It doesn't blame you. You can't be responsible for her sinning, right? And her cheating on you, because that's an action that she chose. But you have a responsibility to do what to do now with this problem, right? You have a responsibility. Oh, you know what? We're not bringing enough money in. Not enough money coming in. We have to cut back. You have the responsibility to act. We are cutting out no more nails. You can't get your nails done and your hair done all the time. No, we're turning in the Mercedes and we're getting a Kia. Okay, that's the responsibility of act. Well, that's my car. It doesn't matter. I have to pay for it. It's my responsibility to act and make sure that we're financially provisional. Right? So the action is I'm removing these things. So that's the responsibility to act. It may not be your fault that you're not making enough money, or you were able to do that while your wife was working. Now your wife's not working. You can't afford that. It's not your fault that you can't afford that now. Your wife is not working anymore for whatever reason. You have a responsibility to act, not to be the one blamed all the time. Now, that doesn't mean men get out of being responsible for the things that they do wrong. No, blame goes to whoever has done it wrong, right? Whoever wronged the situation.
there might be a lot of equally wrong too going on.
Yes, but at the end of the day, the husband still has the responsibility to act.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah, and ultimately, like, it should be like, I get this message of like your happiness as the man, like your family is what matters most, blah blah blah. But it's also like this is like a two-party thing here. Women are kind of called to the same thing. We're called as Christians to be selfless and put each other first. Well, if both of them are doing that, it'll be a much better situation. If the man's only commanded to do that, and then the woman's basically just like, oh, receive his selflessness, like, I don't understand how that would work well long term.
It doesn't work well. And again, what they're promoting here is slavery. You have all the responsibility, but your wife has the authority. So if your wife screws up or things screw up because you're following happy wife, happy life model, right? She gets to blame you for the faults.
And that's that partially is on you for allowing your relationship to run that way too.
But again, if you're being taught happy wife, happy life,
exactly.
If you're being taught servant leader model, you are thinking you're doing what God ordained for you to do.
That's why we're here to wake them up.
And we're telling you guys. And you know what? I got a comment, and a guy said in one of my posts, just because a pastor is like wrong in this, like understanding of scripture, you don't discard the rest of the things he said. And I'm going to say this, like here, if a pastor gets it wrong in just marriage alone, I now have every right to question and everything he says.
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree with both statements. Like, I wouldn't throw the baby out of the bathwater.
I wouldn't throw the baby out the bathwater, but I'm going to be questioning that baby in everything.
But because I know, like, for me, when I look at churches, I think probably one of the most important things in today's modern environment is how does the church view men and women? Is this some egalitarian view? Is this some like mixture trying to fit in? Like, I feel like that is one of the biggest tells of a church's theology overall.
Exactly. And it's like, again, that's a very first thing I look at in a church is like, where do they stand on marriage and men and women? And again, if there's this egalitarian or husbands are supposed to be servants and and lead through servitude, I'm like, I'm out. I don't want to hear anything else. And it's not me trying to, I just don't want to have to sit here and argue with it. Right. Because in my view, it's like, okay, I could listen to what you're saying. There could be a lot of things. Like I've even said this about Ruslan. I could agree with him about 70% of the things that he says. Right.
Mhm.
But there's a big 30%. It's not, and I'm saying these are important 30% that I cannot agree with him on.
Yeah, there's
And
a rank order of issues, especially today. Like
Yes.
if some preacher has some weird view of like the end times or like stuff like secondary issues that I don't have high importance on, like I don't care. Like
Yeah,
I
cool.
will put that at the lower priority level than
Yep.
they're like messing up family structures.
Yeah. And it's like, look what happens. Let's go through like the process of what happens to men. And we have heard of it on our last stream. I've gotten messages. I'm sure you have gotten messages from other men about what happens to when a man, when the church, when there's a divorce, he gets ostracized.
Mhm.
Now the church won't say, hey, you're not allowed to come back here, but they're going to make it real uncomfortable for you to be there. So
Yeah.
now he can't even fellowship with that church.
Yeah, there's probably a very good chance he's leaving the church because
Yeah.
he'll be judged. Likely the assumptions it's his fault. Yeah.
So it's like what they're teaching men and what they're, the doctrine they're teaching men is not attractive for men. I would not encourage any man to say, yeah, sign up to be married as a servant leader. No, don't do it.
I don't think women want it either. Like in their I think they want it like conceptually, like especially in the short term, but I think it makes them deep down unhappy in the long term.
Well, I hear a lot of women say like, I don't want a happy life, happy wife kind of guy. I want a guy that's, like as a man's man that's just leading our family in the right direction. According to who? Is it the direction that she sees fit? Well, then you still want a happy wife, happy life. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's funny, like they're like, oh yeah, happy wife, happy life. Or, husbands need to be a servant leader. Okay. Where's that submission come into play then? Where does the wife's submission come into play when the husband's being a servant leader?
I think servant leader is a just fine term. It's just so bastardized today. And that's what we'll get when we get into the article. He talks about that.
Well, if servant leader is a good term, why isn't it called servant king?
Yeah.
Or like Sarah called Abraham Lord, lowercase L, because he's the ruler of the house. Right? When is the last time you heard any woman call their man, yes, my lord? You damn right I'm your lord.
The king. I'm gonna wear my Burger King crown around the house.
Heck yeah. But they have no problem calling, women have no problem calling their man their beast, their knight in shining armor, their hero.
Their partner.
But listen, a beast, knight in shining armor, their hero, what do they all do? They all are in service to the woman. But when was the last time you heard a woman call a man, this is my king, or this is my lord, or this is, do you see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
They have no problem giving you a title that sounds good. You're my hero. Because why? Heroes save women. They're basically in servitude, in service for women.
Yeah, well, I think it's also, how do they describe their man when he's not around to like their friends or people they meet? Yeah.
Yeah. Let's pull
You
up the
lead,
article.
I
Let's
follow.
kinda like,
Hey, George is in the chat. What's going on, George?
what up, George Bruno?
We got
beard
Elena
god.
in the chat as well. Let's hit some of these chats, Dave. I see we got a couple
Yeah.
super chats from the legendary Smoking Patriot. Smoky Patriot, notice what all three videos had in common. The man's wants, desires, and his needs are dismissed for the benefit of the family. I like the quotes around benefit because, yeah, I think we know long term the benefit won't be there.
Yep.
Rusty Fuel, always in chat. Love you, man. On one hand, Jesus died for the church. On the other hand, the disciples were never disrespectful. Well, that we know in writing. We don't know the bickering going on there, but I got a feeling there's some bickering amongst themselves.
Yeah, but never to Jesus.
Yeah. Well, if they did say something against him or disagreed, he came back pretty quick.
Yeah, get behind me, Satan. Hey, we need to get a shirt that says that. Get behind me, Satan.
Yeah. But should we pull that article up now? I think it'll hit home on some points. We'll just kind of have to we'll probably skim through it. It's a long one. We should put in the description too.
I mean, it became a 20-minute video that he ended up doing.
Yeah,
you can you blow that up? I cannot see that.
We're getting there. Is that good?
Yeah, that's good.
All right.
So let's start from there. Right there. The name of a violent radical left group, Antifa, stands for anti-fascist action. On Twitter, you will I can't even read that. Sometimes see people use those criticizing Antifa. There we go. Antifa stands for anti-fascist. So if you don't like Antifa, that must mean you're supporting fascists. The term servant leader functions similarly in evangelical circles. Basically, if you don't like servant leader, you must support tyrants. Basically is what he's saying. The phrase with a particular specific meaning that transforms it from a evidently good concept into an evangelical terms of art. If you criticize those meanings, you might be accused of supporting selfish leadership. Can you read the rest? I can't. I'm having a hard time with the light.
Servant leadership properly understood is an almost self-evident virtue. Of course, we want leaders who lead in the genuine service of others and of the institutions they direct. But there are problems with the way evangelicals talk about servant leadership, particularly when it comes to married men. It's part of why men turn to online influencers instead of the church. As I noted in his Wall Street Journal op-ed on the topic, online influencers provide an aspirational vision of manhood. Traditional authorities like the church provide a servant leader vision that is extremely unappealing and, more importantly, wrong in the important ways. So he goes into
go down to the term.
Huh?
Let's go down to the term. So right there says the term servant leader.
There.
Go back up. Right there.
The term servant leader was present early in the complementarian movement, though was not especially stressed. John Piper, in his opening chapter from the Complementarian Year text, Recovering Biblical Manhood and Womanhood, wrote, "The call to leadership is a call to humble oneself and take the responsibility to be a servant leader in ways that are appropriate to every differing relationship to women. But the word servant leader, I'm guessing you meant word, only occurs a handful of times in this long book." Scroll down a little bit.
Right here, this is a good one.
Women's Studies professor Mary Kaysen, who was among the originators of complementarianism, echoed Piper when she wrote, "Men have a responsibility to exercise headship in their homes and church family, and Christ revolutionized the definition of what that means. Authority is not the right to rule, it's the responsibility to serve."
So what is that right there? Right there. So you don't have the authority to rule, you have the responsibility to serve. So responsibility without authority is what?
Slavery. Rollo Tomasi.
So what that woman is promoting slavery. Guys, you're not supposed. How dare you think you have the authority to rule over your family? No, you have the authority to serve them. And if it doesn't work out, it's your fault.
And then down further, this other guy, John Stott, wrote, headship implies some degree of leadership, which, however, is expressed not in terms of authority, but of responsibility.
Again, men will always,
again, no authority, but you're responsible.
Every man has the responsibility to act. Right? This is a good one right here. From Tim Keller and Kathy Keller. Let's just go through the quotes right here. This is good.
Yeah, but an even bigger leap was required to understand that it took an equal degree of submission for the men to submit to their gender roles. They are called to be servant leaders. In our world, we are accustomed to seeing the perks and privileges accrue to those who have a higher status. But in the dance of the Trinity, the greatest is the one who is most efficacy or most sacrificial and most devoted to the good of the other. Jesus redefined all authority as servant authority. Any exercise of power can only be done in the service to other, not to please oneself.
So again, no, your wife doesn't want to have sex with you. You know, you can only have sex when your wife sees fit. Right?
That just assumes that also has that paints a really like just a binary that is not a binary, which is either you're exercising power for like service or to please yourself. There's like nothing else in between. Like maybe I'm exercising my power of like to discipline my someone in my family, or maybe
you don't have that power
to make a wise decision. Like, hey, we're not spending money on this, this thing we don't need. Like that's not pleasing himself.
How dare you do that? You don't have the authority to do that. No, it's your responsibility to serve and provide that money for her to spend. You don't get to dictate how it's spent. What on earth? What kind of do you think you are? A leader? No, you're a servant. Get it right.
Let's go back to the articles.
Scroll down.
Another quote here, from who's the quote from?
Nancy
Percy, The Toxic War on Masculinity. For example, a man attending a non-denominational church said, being the head doesn't mean that you're a ruler or something. It's more of a responsibility. A middle-aged charismatic man said, I have learned that being the head, as you say, is really being a servant because you got to swallow hard and put somebody else first. A Presbyterian woman said, a biblical concept of headship actually makes his burden even heavier because he is also supposed to be the kind of man that can hear his wife's needs, that can be there for his wife, that can respect his wife, and that's a big responsibility. So she was interviewing Christian men.
Yep. Let's go down some more. Right here, this is a good one right here.
James Dobson, founder of Focus on the Family, explains that when a man gets married, he stops living for his own ambitions and instead channels his energies into supporting his family. He discovers a sense of pride, yes, masculine pride, because he is needed by his wife and family. Needed not only for protection and financial provision, but also for love and affection.
And then let's read this next part right here. Where it says, because Jesus.
Yeah, because Jesus said that he came not to be served, but to serve. These people would all seem to be on solid ground. But there are some problems by the way they talk about this. I will address two of them today.
Let's go through this part. This is the question that he provides, which is really good.
Yeah, what service should be provided? The matter of servant leadership immediately prompts certain questions. What is the service to be provided? To whom? Who makes those decisions? Who decides whether or not the man is doing a good job at serving? These are pretty fundamental, but evangelicals tend to not address them explicitly. This is the first problem. Their patterns of rhetoric, however, imply that the servant leadership essentially means catering to the desires of your wife and children. And if that's the case, they also implicitly get to be the judge of whether you're doing a good job.
So basically, what they're saying is like a servant leadership is to just serve your wife. Well, in order to determine, then that means that puts the authority on whether or not you're doing a good job in the wife's hands. So she is completely the judge, jury, and executioner on whether you're a good servant or not.
Yep,
But
that
how
bold-
can, okay, so then at that point, how can the people that you are a servant to also be in submission to you?
Yeah, I don't think it's going to work out.
Isn't that an oxymoron?
It absolutely is. I mean, if you think about it in any other situation too, like if like your job, like if that's how it worked with your boss, like your boss's whole mission was to make sure you're happy and all your desires are met, and you had basically the rule book on if he's doing a good job or not.
Yeah.
He's obviously not the boss anymore.
That's not the boss. He's the employee. Let's go down a little bit more. Right here.
So Kathy Keller said a head's job is to use their authority to please, meet needs, and serve. A head does not get all the perks, all the privileges, choose control over the remote, all this, pick the color of the car you buy, etc. Your headship is expressed in servanthood, primarily. There's a similar line in the meaning of marriage. He does not use his headship selfishly to get his own way about the color of the car they buy, who gets to hold the remote control, and whether he has a night out with the boys or stays home to help with the kids when his wife asks him. Where we see that clearly the correct answer is for him to stay home and help with the kids when his wife asks him. This is an example of the patterns of rhetoric used to suggest servant leadership means catering to your wife's desires. Please meet needs and serve. Sounds like what a restaurant waiter does.
Sounds like a servant.
They're even more direct later in the book, writing Jesus.
Let's go down to Mark Driscoll. This is the Mark Driscoll quote.
Yeah. There are, however, moments in the marriage where the husband and the wife don't agree. And we're not talking about here about lesser secondary issue. It's date night and he wants steak and she wants fish and they can't agree on where to go. Those are easy. Just give her what she wants. Those are easy. Just love her, just serve her, do what she wants. The wife is always right.
Husbands are simply to give their wives whatever they want, even if the wife is behaving selfishly. So, what your needs, screw that. Oh, here's another good one. Russell Moore.
A husband's leadership is about a special accountability for sabotaging his own wants and appetites with a forward-looking plan for the best interests of his wife and children. Headship is not about having one's laundry washed or one's meals cooked or one's sexual drives met, but rather about constantly evaluating how to step up first to lay one's life down for one's family.
So, you know what, guys? You're working all day. Your wife's at home. Yeah, you may have some kids, right? And you got to work tomorrow. No, how dare you expect to have your laundry done? Who the heck do you think you are? Like, oh, a meal? You expect her to cook and clean and provide you a meal after taking care of your kids all day? Wow, the nerve of you. Oh, and you expect her to have sex with you? What is wrong with you? How dare you even have that idea? Yeah,
that quote definitely doesn't sell marriage to men.
Like right here, think about this. If you're a guy, right? You're sitting down, you're thinking about getting married, you're in marriage counseling, and the pastor says, look, man, so you want to get married? Yeah. Marriage is a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing. It's a very sacrificial thing. You know that? Yeah, I know it's sacrificing. Yeah. So you know what? You don't get the right to expect her to cook for you. No. You may still have to do that. And your own laundry and stuff like that. You can't expect her to tidy the house. No. She's allowed to sit there and eat buns and watch Days of Our Lives all day long. And you can't expect her to clean up. All right. Oh, and sleep with you. What is she, a whore? You can't expect her to just want to sleep with you. Like, no. All those things that you think comes with marriage, she doesn't have to do them. But you have to want to serve her. So, you still want to get married? I guarantee you guys will be walking right out. Be like, nope. I'd rather pay child support than have to put up with all that. You know what I'm saying? Like, you want to have kids? I'd rather pay child support than have to be a servant like that.
Well, it's just so one-sided. Like,
It is.
I get if this is expressed to both sides, okay, like I get it. But if it's just on one side, it's like no one's going to sign up for that.
But it's like you are expected to provide. You are expected to protect. You are expected to meet her needs and her desires, right? But how dare you even think that she's supposed to do these, fulfill yours? No, your job is to do that for her. She's not supposed to do that for you. Why would anybody want to get married? What's the benefit of that? That what they're promoting is slavery. And I'm telling you right now, no guy is going to want to get into that.
Yeah, I would definitely read that as a non-married man and be like, okay, I'll pass. I'll go the Paul route or
you
something.
are a non-married man. So if you read that, since you're non-married, right?
Yeah.
If you read that and you're like, okay, that's what's expected of you, and that's what's expected in marriage. Wouldn't you just?
I'd be like, I'm not called for that. Like, that's not my mission. I'd rather do Paul's route.
Yeah, you're like, I'd rather.
It would basically be like, how strong is my sex drive that I would want to get married for that?
Exactly. And you know what? Be honest, most guys be like, why would I put up with that? I'd rather just ask God to forgive me for watching porn.
Yeah.
Like, do you know what I'm saying? Like, not to say that it's a good thing to do.
Well, it's just being pragmatic of how men would adapt to this.
Yeah.
I mean, we obviously see how they are adapting to it with the marriage rate.
Yeah, so it's like, and then it's funny because when they talk about the marriage rate, right? They're like, oh, but divorce is on decline. So is marriage. Nobody's getting married. Nobody wants to get married. Guys are not wanting to get married. Why? Because they can't expect anything from their wives, apparently. Let's continue.
Let's scroll down. Because I think we get the idea on what they're saying. Well, I'll read this here. Evangelicals have an incredibly bleak view of what it means to be a married man. They basically teach that his job is to be his wife's manservant. And this isn't even all of the negatives when it comes to complementarianism. They literally, theologically teach that everything that happens is the man's fault.
Your wife cheats on you? Your fault.
We can skip this, I think.
Yeah, you can skip that.
We got the idea down here.
Justifying the servant leader. Yeah.
Well, I'll just read that Keller quote in John 13:1-7. Jesus on the night before his death famously washed his disciples' feet, both showing and teaching them he was defining authority and headship. He said, "Do you understand what I've done for you? You call me teacher and Lord, and rightfully so. For that is what I am. Now that I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you should also wash one another's feet. I have set you an example that you should do as I have done for you. I tell you the truth, no servant is greater than his master. The master has just made himself into a servant who has washed his disciples' feet, thus demonstrating in the most dramatic way the authority and leadership mean that you become a servant. You die to yourself in order to love and serve the other." John Piper also refers.
There's this right here. It says in this very passage right here, Peter initially refuses to allow Jesus to wash his feet, saying, "Never shall you wash my feet." It was only when Jesus told him that if he did not allow Jesus to wash his feet, then you have no part with me. Right? And then Peter relented. So right here, this is a good part right here. We learned two things. First, Jesus is the head, right? Servant leader. Jesus did not allow other people to determine in the manner in which he served them. He made that decision. Secondly, some people didn't want to allow Jesus to serve him the way that he chose to. By doing so, they would be in rebellion against him. And Jesus said, get away from me if you don't like the way that I'm serving you. So we see another passage, right? In the context of Christ saying that he comes to serve, specifically regarding his crucifixion, he said, the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and give his life as ransom for many, right? But Jesus said, when Jesus told this to his disciples that he would be killed, Peter said, God, I'd forbid it, Lord, this shall never happen to you. Which Jesus replied, get behind me, Satan. You are a stumbling block to me, for you are not setting the mind on God's interest, but man's. So again, we see Jesus, we see Jesus' followers don't get to define how Jesus has served them. So that can be in rebellion against him by arguing against the service he wants to provide him. Right. So we don't see that in marriage. A husband says, hey, I'm going to provide this. Wife says, I want you to provide that. Well, I'm not going to provide that. I'm providing this. You either get in line or get out, right?
Yeah, I mean, imagine the situation with Jesus washing the feet. If they asked him to do that, number one, they wouldn't ask him to do that.
Exactly.
Because that would be like, he is Jesus. Like, imagine asking Jesus to wash your feet. No, he chose to serve them in that way, in that moment, and use it as an example.
Yep. And so we have no problem when Jesus gave commandments, right? He gave a lot of commandments, and it scrolls on here, right? He gives a lot of commandments, and he tells people what to do, right? But if you are a servant leader, you don't get to tell people what to do. You don't have the authority. Jesus had the authority and the responsibility to save the bride. And the only way he could do that if the bride is in full submission to what? Jesus' authority, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you can't have Jesus served his bride when the bride was in full submission, or regardless if the bride was in full submission. But there's a consequence if the bride is not in full submission. Depart from me. Right here is a good explanation of complementarianism and where we get the servant leadership model. Okay. Can you read that one?
Yeah. Complementarianism was developed in response to the feminist movement during the 1980s, and it was clearly influenced by that environment. We see this, in fact, that its teachings are primarily restricted in scope to two matters: men as the head of the home and a male-only pastorate. While leading architect John Piper himself takes a more expansive view of gender complementarity, most of the complementarian works, including by him, are restricted to these two matters. Additionally, even these two matters are treated as essentially arbitrary decisions by God. They deny that men are by nature better suited than women to be the head of the home, for example. I'm not going to provide a detailed support for these points today, but just as one example, John Piper once wrote, "The roles of leadership and submission in marriage are not based on competence. God never said that a man is appointed to be head because he is more competent, or that the woman is appointed to submission because she is less competent." While saying that men and women are different, complementarians are typically vague and unspecific about what they mean by that, unless it invokes making a negative statement about male qualities or a positive statement about female ones. The practical implication of this is that their definition of gender gets limited solely to relationships with the opposite sex. John Piper defines biblical masculinity this way in his book. At the heart of mature masculinity is a sense of benevolent responsibility to lead, provide for, and protect women in the ways appropriate to a man's differing relationships. At the heart of. This phrase signals that the definitions are not exhaustive. There's more to masculinity and femininity, but there's not less. We believe that this is the heart of what true manhood means, even if there's a mystery to our complementary existence that we will never exhaust. While acknowledging there's more to manhood, this defines masculinity exclusively in the terms of relationship to women, dramatically restricting the scope of masculine vocation. In light of this definition, it becomes clear why they implicitly define servant leadership as catering to the desires of a man's wife and children. Their conception of manhood is limited only to this domain.
Mhm.
This leads to a false dichotomy pattern I've written about elsewhere. The husband's authority, like the son's over us, is never used to please himself, but only to serve the interests of his wife. Headship does not mean a husband simply makes all the decision, nor does it mean he gets his way in every disagreement. Why? Jesus never did anything to please himself. Romans 15:2-3. A servant leader must sacrifice his wants and needs to please and build up his partner.
Scroll down. This is a good part.
Yeah, this is what I was saying before. We see here a false choice presented between pleasing himself and serving the interests of his wife. Again, Russell Morse spoke similarly, saying headship is not about having one's laundry washed or one's meals cooked or one's sexual drives met, but rather about constantly evaluating how to step up first to lay one's life down for one's family. There's again this false choice between naked selfishness and sacrificing for wife and children. There is no middle ground.
So it's like saying like, oh, because you want to have this done, that's selfish. You're selfish. Because what if the wife doesn't want to have to do that for you? You're selfish for expecting her to do that for you. And it's like, wait a minute. Let's talk about like, so it's like for one's family. Well, look, dear, if I don't have clean clothes to go to work, I can't go to work with dirty clothes. Well, then wash them yourself. Okay, then what is she there for? Not saying that your wife needs to be there to be your doormat or your laundry maid, but what is she again? Well, then what does she bring to the table?
Yeah, there's just no expectations set on the woman.
Exactly. There's no expectations. You know, and it's like ridiculous. Like, again, if Christians want to make marriage like this, like the most unattractive thing for men, bravo. You're doing a great job. You're doing a really good job of making men not want to get married. Like, if I believed that that was what marriage was supposed to be, I wouldn't be married.
Yeah, and I think he points out there what they say and what they do are kind of different here, right?
Yeah.
There are actually many possible other choices available. I've asked before, but when Tim Keller made the choice to go to New York and start Redeemer Presbyterian Church, was he pleasing himself or serving the interests of his wife? Obviously, neither. He did it for the sake of mission, and despite his wife's belief that moving to New York was a bad idea. In fact, they use this story in the book as their example of what headship should look like. The objects of service in the Bible are clearly not always limited to a man's wife and children. Peter brought his wife along with him to support of his apostolic mission, for example. And this goes to like what we're called to as Christians, and it seems like the call is to go make disciples, not please your wife and family. Like,
exactly.
You don't see that like kind of anywhere. I think and I think that's where like you as a man, like your mission, in my opinion, should be create disciples. And then like the woman that you bring in should be a support to that mission, ultimately, along with your family. And not that your mission is your wife's happiness. And then sometimes maybe if you have the free time, you kind of try to make some disciples.
How dare you have free time? You're supposed to go to bed exhausted. How dare you conserve any energy to make disciples? Mike, what is wrong with you?
I don't know, man.
Why do you think you're allowed to have free time? You know what? If you have free time, you didn't please your wife enough. I bet you there's some laundry that she could have you help out her with. Or you didn't read a long enough bedtime story to the kids. Yeah. Or you didn't work enough.
That's the other funny thing too when you think about these men giving their wife kind of like the stay-at-home mom dream.
Yeah.
Like, think about how different that life was 200 years ago versus today. Like, there was no washing machines and dishwashers and like clothing stores as they are today.
Everything was
diapers. Like, there wasn't all this stuff that has made that life much simpler.
Yeah, it was. And you think about it, guys made like, who created the washing machine? Men. Who created the oven? Men. Who created Victoria's Secret? A man, right? Like, men created all these things to make women's life easier, right? So it's like back in the day, it would look like equal labor. There was an equality in work there, right? A man is gone about 10 to 12 hours a day. He's working in the factory, right? The wife is at home working because she's washing everything by hand. Then she has to go wash the clothes by hand. And then she has to hang dry them on the little rods with the clothespins. And then from there, after they dried, she had to fold them and then put them away. And then they didn't have a vacuum. No. She had to sweep that house out. And then she had to dust everything because she didn't have a Swiffer that could like attach itself to all the dust in your house. Like, she had to do it. And then, oh, you wanted milk? She had to go out there and grab the cow's teats and go right. Just so
It was truly a full-time job. Truly.
It was a full-time job. So there was understood that my wife is at home and she's busting her ass all day, just like I'm busting my ass all day out here. Now we got wives. Oh, I can just throw the clothes in the laundry. I'm going to talk to Sarah. Hey, Sarah, how you doing? They're going to talk for like 4 or 5 hours. She gets home. Oh, I'm so exhausted. Sarah is such an exhausting person to talk to. You're like, what?
Yeah.
It's not an equal exchange there anymore for marriage. It's like convenient for her, slavery for you. Deal with it.
Yeah, and you still, even if you provide, like, I won't name any names, but a friend of mine is going through a divorce as of a couple weeks ago, and he gave her the stay-at-home wife dream. And I literally think because of social media and the influence there, like, she had like literally zero issues with him. I think she got bored and wanted more adventure and didn't want to settle down and decided to go her own way.
You know, it's funny. It's like when I hear women complain about, like, especially when they're when they're complaining about their husbands or whatever, like, oh my God, Tom, I just swept the floor and you tracked all your mud in. And he's like, I just want him to be like, oh my God, Kathy, I just made all this money and you spent it. You know, like, can we say that? Like,
I would think so.
Like, you know what? You need to sweep up your mud. Then good. You need to go out there and make the money that you just spent. Like, there's this expectation that regardless of what they do in the house, we have to treasure that. Like, oh my God, the floor is swept. I have to tiptoe and make sure I don't dirty anything. Like, oh, Kevin, I just did the dishes and you just brought some dishes in the kitchen. Yeah, Sarah, I just paid the bills and you just ran up the phone bill. Like, you know
well, I think to kind of hit the other side of this today, or from today's perspective, there are a lot of women that are working just as much as their husband and then have to do all the house stuff. So I can see where in those circumstances they're pissed.
Absolutely. I think in those circumstances, if you guys both have to work to provide, right? To make, because let's face it, the reality today is that most families cannot survive off a single income, whether by choice or by where the location and the demographics that they live in. Okay. And I mean by choice, because they either put themselves in financial hardships by trying to keep up with the Joneses.
Right. They got some stupid student loan debt and a $3,500 a month apartment.
Bad professions that were not economically beneficial to them. Right. So now you have to have most families have to have a dual income situation. Right. And that's understandable. And in those situations, I have no problem saying, hey, if you guys are both working, you both do the chores. Okay. Like, hey, maybe you clean the bathroom and she does the dishes.
And I think ultimately the man, like you as the man in the circumstance, you should be working to try to get it out of that circumstance. Because I think it's just not great long term. Like your marriage
It's
will be
not great long
happier.
term.
Probably. Well, I'm not going to say happier because that doesn't really necessarily be the goal. But I think it's just a better setup if she's not having to work some stressful masculine job like you are, and then
Yeah.
also expected to be the nurturing mother of your family.
I don't think it's a problem for guys to say like, all right, honey, you know what? You need to get a part-time job. I think it's one, it does multiple things for them. It doesn't idle hands are the devil's playground, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it keeps them engaged, it keeps them busy, it keeps those skill sets up, you know. So God forbid you died, they at least have the skill to go out there and work and provide an income for themselves and the family or whatever, right? But on top of that, it's like, hey, not saying I won't provide for all your needs, but see, there's needs and wants. My job as your man is to provide for your needs. Your wants are a whole different, ball game here. You could provide for your wants. You get a little part-time job, and you could provide for your wants. You know, and I don't think there's a problem with saying that.
Yeah,
Like, hey,
especially like there's circumstances I think when they absolutely need to be home, but
yeah,
if the kids are 14 years old and at school and stuff all the time, like, do they need to be doing that, stay-at-home wife situation still in the same manner?
but it's like, oh, you want to go on vacation. Cool. Well, you know what? Vacation is not a need, it's a want, right? And if you want us to go on vacation,
They
I
marry
can
a
help
lifestyle though, Glenn.
marry a broke lifestyle, keep you humble.
They don't marry a man, they marry a lifestyle.
But
the
it's
red
like,
pill
okay, let's say
says.
you want to go to Cabo for a week. Cool. You know what? If I save up to go to Cabo for a week, it'll take us like maybe 2 years. Oh, I don't want to go in 2 years. I want to go next, in 6 months. Cool. Get a part-time job, save up for Cabo, and then we'll go to Cabo. You want me to pay for it? How dare you? That's not a need, honey. That's a want. Well,
Yeah,
I
and
need a
according to the
vacation.
servant leader mentality, it sounds like you gotta go figure out how to pay for that.
Again, and this just proves why this. Again, like I said, I call it a conspiracy theory, but Christians are doing a better job at making men not want to get married than secular people are, or they're doing at
Yeah.
least just as good as a job. The secular side, right? The non-Christian side is you got all these hoes out here that want the bag, that don't want don't want a husband, they want a lifestyle, right? And then on the Christian side, you got, hey, if you want to be married, you're gonna be her slave. And it's like, I gotta choose between being a slave or dealing with the chick that wants the bag. I'm
Well,
out.
there's the other
I don't want
part
to get married.
too. Like, just go back like 250 years and just picture how you imagine marriage would be. You got these very busy, probably lives that you're kind of trying to survive, and both roles are probably extensive hard work. And there's not like the one thing I always complain about today is it seems like men are expected to be the female best friend of their wife.
Yep.
That's like an expectation now. I don't think that existed. I think that's a luxury belief, a luxury idea of modern times because we're not as busy, and females also don't have I don't think their community as much as they used to. So they need that out of their man too. So the expectation of the man is just so much, because you hear all these women like men aren't emotionally intelligent, men don't share their emotions, blah, like all this stuff that is asking men to be what they aren't. And it's like, can we have some real expectations? What was the Bible marriage, or what were biblical marriages like? Like, if we're being realistic about thinking about what it was likely like in those times. Today, these are
Well,
luxury ideas.
yeah, exactly. There's so many luxury ideas, and you also got to look at like the fact that when it comes to leadership, the general doesn't ask the captain if it's, hey, do you think I should do this? The general makes a decision and be like, hey guys, this is the plan of the attack. All right. I sought out my intelligence. I asked other people what we're what's a good way to attack this. That means as a man, I go to my other brothers in Christ and be like, hey, this is what I'm trying to do. Do you think this is biblical? Do you think this is sound? Yeah, okay. So I'm not gonna go if the general doesn't go to a captain and be like, hey, so I was thinking of kind of like marching this way, but I just kind of really want to know what you thought. Like, do you think we should go here, or should we go over there and march over there? But I just want to do what you want to do. I don't want to upset you. Like whatever you want to do is fine with me. I think that's good. Your idea is probably better than mine. Like what would make you happy?
Funny, women. I don't think women actually want that anyway.
like just asking. Think about this. Asking your wife or a girlfriend where she wants to eat kind of tells you how she like. Wait a minute. What? I don't know.
Tell her where you're eating.
You tell her. So if you're willing to tell her where you're eating, you're going to tell her where you're going to live. You're going to tell her what you expect. Jesus didn't ask the disciples what if they wanted their feet washed. He told them, you're getting your feet washed. Jesus didn't say, hey guys, do you think it's a good idea if I get crucified? I mean, I know I'm going to be hanging on there. They're going to stab me in the side. They're going to crush this crown of thorns on my head. Do you really think I should go through with it or not? Like,
and I think that's what women actually want. Like they want the man to be in that leadership role. I think the women that don't, they're going with the feminism brainwashing and, basically reciting what culture tells them, but they know biologically they don't want that. They want the leadership man. They want they want to go into the man's frame and just not have to worry about life. Just do their thing.
Exactly. And what we're seeing now today is like women want to go into your men's frame and then tell the men how he's going to do his frame.
That's not his frame.
That's not his frame. Or women want to tell men how that they are supposed to handle situations. You need to handle this situation this way. Why? According to who? Well, because it's I like it that way. I don't care. You know what I'm saying? Like, you don't have to like the way that the man does it. It's his frame. If you don't like his frame, get out of it.
Yep.
Don't tell him what he needs to do to, you could say if a man goes, hey, you know what, honey, do you think I could, what was a better way to handle this problem with, let's say me and Mike had a beef, right? And I go to Mike and me and Mike are arguing about something. And I'd be like, you know what? Do you think I handled this correctly? You could bounce it off of them. And
of course,
I'm inquiring, right?
Yeah. And I think it's always common, like, especially like when she's raising the kids, like she's going to have the control over a lot of that. And you're going to be trusting her as the man in the younger years, especially like you're the CEO over a manager,
Yeah. And there's a difference there, right? Like, I love the Kevin Hart skit, right? About the cookies and his daughter. You ever seen that one?
I'm sure I have. I'm blanking on it right now.
All right. So Kevin Hart's daughter goes, Daddy, can I have some cookies? And before you can respond, his wife is in the other room, like, don't be giving her any cookies. Right? And Kevin's like, how you gonna tell me what to do? And he's like, why are you buying cookies that people can't eat? Unedible cookies, like women tend to try to jump the man's authority, right? And it's like, you're not going to do this. Here, ladies, whatever women that are watching, I'm going to give you the best advice you can get. The moment you tell a guy, you don't do this, or you better not do this, or you're just asking him to do it.
I think it goes vice versa too.
Oh, it does. But Well, here's the difference. When a guy tells you don't be doing that, the normally it's a consequence with it. You know, like you do this, you're stepping out of my frame, we're probably gonna be over. If you decide to be a hoe, we're not gonna be together. Like, you know what I'm saying? There's a consequence there.
Mm-hmm.
But like women, if you threaten a guy like, don't you dare. Oh, now you're daring me. Like now I have to. It's like, you know what? I gotta let you know that you don't control me just by doing that. Like you call it being petty, whatever you want. It's me exerting my authority. You know, like you better not go out with the guys tonight. Don't you dare have a guys' night out. Fellas, where we going? Mike, where we going?
We're gonna get you to Florida.
There we go. But I think that, you know, when we think about the servant leader, now don't get me wrong, there's aspects of the model that I agree with. You know, provide, protect, you know, that thing. I agree with that. I also agree with, like, you got to consider your wife's feelings.
Yeah, of course.
Keyword is consider, not default to. Consider. Hey, honey, you know what? I think Sarasota is a good look. I want to get closer with the boys and expand this thing. You know, that's my goal in a couple of years. What are your thoughts on that? Oh, I'm not sure. Okay, I could consider her, you know, reservations for it. That doesn't determine whether or not I go through with it or not. That doesn't change. If I already made the choice, like, hey, this is what I'm doing. Okay, my job when I consider, right, is that I'm going to try to figure out a way that we could make those things that are concerning her not a big concern, right? Like,
Yeah.
give and take a little bit there. Oh, I'm going to be so far from my family. You know what? What if we made it a priority that we fly out to your family twice a year, right? Now I'm giving a concession, right? But I'm not deterring from my path. I'm just, you know, giving a little bit, trying to make it work.
Being
right?
a wise leader. Like if you're
Exactly.
being a leader at the business world, you can't be some sort of dictator. Like then everyone's leaving.
Exactly. But at the same time, you consider your wife's words, you consider her feelings, but you don't default to them.
Right.
Considering means I'm going to I'm looking into this. I'm going to see what I could do here, but that doesn't mean that's going to change the direction that we're going.
Amen.
And too often, guys, when they hear consider your wife's feelings, it means default to wife's authority.
Well, they just don't want to deal with the conflict. So many guys are so conflict averse. They don't want to deal with it.
So, like, you know, when we think about leadership, right? Leadership requires decisive decision making, right? And to lead the way. So, but leadership also means getting in the trenches and putting in the work side by side your men. So, you know what? You guys, you may come home and the house is a mess, but you see your wife's in the kitchen cooking dinner, right? You could lead by example by picking up a little bit, you know. You're helping out. Yes, you worked a long day. Should you be required to clean up after her crumbs? Because you didn't make them. You haven't been home all day to make crumbs, right? Should you have to? No, but you can lead by example.
And that comes down to just being selfless, and that's what both partners are being called to do in the end.
And it's like, you know what? I heard this said, and I don't think it's red pill, but it's a really good saying. It's like, if the husband is working, and this only works in a perfect world, but let's say the husband is not worried about his needs, He's worried about her needs and focused on fulfilling her needs, right? And if the wife is focused on fulfilling her husband's needs, you're going to have peace. If the wife is fulfilling your needs, you're not going to need it to go elsewhere. And if the husband is fulfilling the wife's needs, what is there to complain about? She's not going to go elsewhere, right? But what happens is we see the wife focus on her needs, her desires, right? And the husband focused on his wife's needs and her desires. And then after time, the husband's like, what about me? And then we have the church saying, what about you? You know, and that's the problem.
Yeah.
It's a one-sided, the church is making marriage a one-sided relationship.
Yeah, well, it reminds me of the No More Mr. Nice Guy book from Robert Glover. Like, if you read that, he talks a lot about a lot of these, quote, nice guy men, as he defines, which you can go look up his definition of that. But so many of them are Christian men. Like, you can tell that we're taught this taught this church model. And so they're endlessly trying to please their wife. And all that does is actually make her resent him more, because he has no spine or backbone and allows her to just run his life. And it makes her feel like the leader. She doesn't want to be in that role. So then she resents him and is a bitch to him. And it's just cycle. And a lot of these men, once they learn how to grow a spine and become the leader and build and have her fall in his frame, then all of a sudden her behavior drastically changes.
Yep. Well, you know, it's also interesting. Like, I always go back to this as, like, you remember in The Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe, right? And like one of the girls, it's like they just talked about, oh, you need to go see Aslan, and he's a lion. And the girl's like, is he safe? And the response was like, no, he's a lion, but he's good. And I think guys need to stop focusing on being the safe guy, but be the good guy, right? And the good guy is not good what's according to the woman's definition. You need to be a good guy according to what God tells you to be, what the Bible says.
A virtuous man.
Yes. Right. And then there you go. You're good. Good doesn't mean you avoid consequences. Safe means you avoid consequences. I'm safe from being punished. Women want a safe guy. They don't want a good guy.
They want a safe guy after they're hit the wall.
Well, yeah, after they hoed out and got their back.
Yeah, then when they're like 30, then they're looking for the safe guy.
But you notice they want the bad boy, right? This is hit to me. This is hit me right now. Women want the bad boy when they're hoeing out. Then they want the safe guy, the nice guy, when they're done being a hoe. But never do they want the good guy.
Yeah.
Think about it. They want the bad boy, the safe guy, but not the good guy. Because the good guy is first good to himself. Right? He knows his frame. He's like, okay, I'm not going to put up with this nonsense. This is not good for me. All right? I don't need this behavior. Right? Women don't want the good guy. They want the safe or the bad boy. They don't want good. Because good
want toxicity or
toxicity.
Safety.
Well, they want toxicity, or did they want to be toxic?
Yeah.
No.
Well, we're like, hour and a half in. Is there more of this article we should cover? And actually, I think we have one super chat from Smoking Patriot.
Let's go through the Glenn, give me a cigar and whiskey. I got stories for you. You know what? I'm coming to Florida. And when I come to Florida, I'm gonna let you know. And then you can meet up with us. All right. I got some cigars. Mike gets the whiskey.
We'll make it happen.
And we'll make it happen. Make it happen. We'll barbecue too.
For sure.
This time I'm not buying no tomahawks though.
No, we'll make it happen.
Yeah, we'll definitely do that. I got you. But let's go to I want to highlight. Can we go back to the article? I want to highlight something that's interesting. Scroll up. Keep on going, 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 keep on going.
You looking for those bullet points?
Yes.
Here.
There we go. This is, this right here really hits home for me because it really raises the question. As a servant leader, what service do you provide to your spouse? Right? Because we already know to whom, and that's going to be to your spouse, right? To your wife and your kids. We already got that, right? So we can scratch that one off. Then who makes the decisions on what service you provide? Right? And then who decides whether or not you're doing a good job or not? And the way that the church frames this, and when I say the church, I don't mean all churches. I'm just saying the evangelical or the mega churches, or just to say what we hear now, because we don't really hear a whole lot of preachers preaching against this. So let's clarify that. But it's like your wife isn't happy. You've been married for however many years. She decides to leave. Automatically, the default thought process, because of the servant leader model, is you failed. You must not be doing a good job at being a servant leader. That's why she wants out. So automatically, they're determining that the judge, jury, and executioner, or the person that determines whether or not you're being a good husband or not, is completely dependent upon the wife's emotional, state or emotional satisfaction.
Yeah, and that's, looking at JR's comment there, what will it take to detox the church from this mindset? The evangelical church, it's just men just need to leave and go find, like the churches that are not preaching that message. The funny thing is that's where all the women are. And so the single guy's looking for women. They're not going to find any in the good churches.
Yep. And so again, anybody that like upholds a servant leader model, like this is the question, ask them. What service provided? Who makes those decisions? And they're going to try to point back to, well, Jesus, died for the church. Okay, that means, I have to be willing to die for my wife. What else? You got to love your wife. Okay, cool. I love her and I have to discipline her because love is discipline. What else? That doesn't mean I have to listen to her. Doesn't mean I have to cater to her needs or her not her needs, but her wants. And
I think part of it too goes to that whole concept of women don't sin.
Exactly.
And that the kind of the church view of women, like, do they actually sin? And because in the church you wouldn't even think it. So then the assumption is, well, if this woman who never sins is leaving this man, obviously he did something wrong.
Yeah. And that framework is why so many men are leaving the church. Right there. The default is that you are the problem. Automatically, that's the default. Well, why do men's ministries are small? Why? Why do we want to hear about that we're the problem from a pastor too? We already hear it from the wife, right? Nobody's the advocate. Like, you would think that the church would be an advocate for both men and women together. They're not. They're advocating for slavery. You're right. Men will have to create their own groups, just like the Iron Disciples.
And there,
You
I mean,
know?
there are churches that are good. It just takes time. Like we put out a
It
reel
does.
today. Like you need to go put the effort in to find them. Like Dave and I here found, I think, a really good church. I've been liking it. I respect the messages they've been preaching, and I don't really have any issues with them right now. So I'm going to keep going. And I think there's options out there. It's not completely hopeless like people make it out to be. And I want to read a quick.
Finding a good church is like finding a wife. You gotta spin plates.
I think there's there's more better church options than that.
Well, no, it's just like, you don't just commit to the first church you walk into. You try them out, just like you spin plates. You spin churches. You can make churches your plate.
I want to read because I want to give a props to whatever church this is. This is from one of our guys in chat here, Billy. I'm reading your comment about that church or event your wife went to at a women's event. So he said his wife went to a women's event at church, and the speaker was a woman who had been married 20 years, and apparently after 16 years, her husband told her he had an affair on top of a porn addiction. She was at that point convicted and had enough introspection to realize that she had become a disrespectful, naggy, unattractive wife who didn't cherish her husband and incentivized him to cheat. She from then on made the conscious decision each and every day to respect him, shower, doll herself up with dress and makeup before he got home, and let him know he's cherished by the small things like notes in his lunch and that she makes on top of breakfast and dinner. And now years later, not surprisingly, they've never been in a better place. So this is, that event was an example, I think, a rare example of women holding other women kind of accountable to how their actions affect the man a lot.
Yeah. I think that's a great example. Not saying like, oh, the man got away with it. He got to cheat and, get his wife in shape. Like, because that's how some women will look at it. Like, where was his consequence? Well, his consequences. This is where a lot of people, and I think we'll wrap after this, but like a lot of people don't understand is like, when a man is not loving his wife like Christ loved the church, women look at like, oh, you're sinning against your wife. Sure. It's true. More importantly, he's sinning against God. When a wife is not respecting her husband or falling to his authority and being submissive to her husband, she is sinning against God because it's the covenant that she made. She didn't just make that covenant with her husband. It was with God.
Exactly.
So we can focus on everything the guys do wrong, sure. But ladies, if you are not submissive to your husband, because the Bible doesn't say be submissive to your husband when it's convenient. It says in everything.
It also doesn't say he has to be doing his role perfectly.
Exactly. It doesn't say that he's going to do his role perfectly either. It just says you need to still do what you're accountable of doing. Well, I can't do it if he's not doing that. Then you're choosing to live in sin.
Exactly. And I think, in cases of infidelity like that, frankly, both ways, I think I view it as like likely if a man in a committed marriage cheats today, he got pushed towards that for some reason. I don't think
I agree
most men are behaving like, some of these, I'm not going to name names, but you know what I'm talking about, where their whole mission is that. I think most men are not looking to do that, and they get pushed into a corner, and it's not excusing the behavior in any way.
Not at all.
But I think it's kind of like like an alcohol. Like I use this analogy one time. Like men are all alcoholics with sex, and so if you're gonna tempt
Mike,
if you're gonna tempt him, essentially the alcoholic, by having alcohol around all the time, drinking from him, whatnot, eventually he's probably going to fail. And I view that as the core, or the equivalence is like basically depriving him, or letting yourself go so he's no longer attracted to you or something. Like eventually that temptation is going to wear him down. Some men, you know, they got the ability to handle it for a lifetime. Some men are going to fail at some point. And
Well, it's also like this. It's like you could, because a lot of girls like, oh, I just need to be pretty. I need to keep myself up. You're right. That's part of it. But if you're not being submissive, if you are nagging, if you're a pain in his ass, right? Doesn't matter how hot he is, no matter how hot you are. A guy will sleep with the ugly secretary that is submissive, that is pleasant to be around, that's agreeable. He's going to rather sleep and cheat with the ugly secretary than your sexy, disagreeable ass.
Yep.
Because it's going to be like, hey, you know what? She's ugly, but at least she's pleasant to be around. So women could, it doesn't take just being hot. Hot makes you fuckable. All right.
Yep.
Being submissive and respectful and agreeable makes you a wife worthy.
And I guarantee you'll see him behave better too.
Exactly.
And I mean, and then it goes both ways. A lot of men a lot of times will neglect their wife in many different ways, and then you're shocked a couple years later when she found some other guy at her work that she confided in and eventually had an affair with. Like,
but again, it goes to like, okay, neglected her needs or neglected her desires.
Right. And today, I would say that's where those
I don't think women know the
get
difference.
mixed.
I don't think women know the difference between their needs and desires.
Yeah, and I think part of it is that like they want that female best friend. If they don't feel they're getting that out of you, then they might go get that out of their coworker guy, who's willing to talk to him all the time.
Whatever guy is going to be a
stuff.
shoulder to cry on, eventually he will be the she rides on.
Yeah. But
so how do you want to wrap this up, Mike?
Yeah, anything else we should touch on from that article? We should put that. Well, we should link to that in chat because let's at least the YouTube video. It's a good listen for all you guys. I think he nails it kind of on pointing out all the different big name preachers and where they're just missing the mark, and then he provides some good commentary on it later.
Yeah. So you guys, this is just a part one. Let's just be clear. This is part one. We do have plan on doing part two with Pastor Joel Webbin, and I think we're going to do another topic with him. He wants to talk about red pill. He wants to understand the red pill space. And I think we're going to have a good conversation with him about that as well. So stay tuned in that in the next couple of weeks here. You guys continue to pray for John and Joe. They're going through some.
Yeah, they may not know. Like the reason it's just been me the last couple of weeks. John and Joe's father passed away here recently. So yeah, just have them and their family in your prayers. They're out of state right now, kind of dealing with the family and the challenges and the mourning that comes with that. So just have them in your prayers, guys, and we'll see them again, I think, in the next week or two.
But other than that, I don't have anything coming up in the next couple of days. Do you have anything, Mike?
Nothing on the docket. We had to push some things just because John and Joe were gone. So nothing specifically right now. So just looking forward to the next conversation with Joel. If you guys have any topics you want us to hit on,
yeah, that's a good
don't
question.
hesitate to reach out on that because we kind of go with what.
If you guys see if you guys want to throw a topic in the chat too, are you free Friday? I'm free Friday. If you guys throw a topic in the chat, maybe something that me and Mike could cover this week. If you guys want us to do another stream, we could do another show Friday. So any topic you guys want in the chat, throw it in there, give us some ideas. It'll help us out. Coming up some stuff. We do have a lot of material to work with, but your guys' input is vital and important to us.
Yeah, that's why we're doing this live. Otherwise, we would just pre-record everything. We like to
Exactly.
chat with you.
You know,
So,
tell Joel strong men will absolutely not listen to weak men.
Yeah.
You saw that strong men, weak men thing. Oh, Elena Barr has a what expectation? Oh, this is what we were going to talk about, right?
Yeah, well,
Didn't
we kind of talked about this last time, right?
but we didn't really like dive into it. So
yeah, it would be. I think we have to do a full podcast on it. We've actually been talking. I've been talking a bit with Mel, who we had on before,
Yeah.
and then Zach from Kaz TV on this topic because there's just some disagreements on what women kind of bring to the table dating, and yeah, I think it'll be. We'll have to figure out a conversation. I think that's a whole nother topic today.
I think we got to look at it from marriage, right? Because once you understand what you expect from a woman in marriage,
you want to see signs of that in the dating process.
exactly. So then you already like. So she may not have all those things.
Yeah, and she shouldn't be giving wife things away to him dating anyway. Like,
yeah, because like if he doesn't see any qualities in her that is marriageable, you know, then
yeah,
why would he want to marry you? You know what I'm saying? So I think that'll be a good topic to dive into.
Mel
Mel
versus Mike.
versus Mike.
It could. I don't know. It could happen. Zach, Mel, and I are in a group chat, and Zach wants to do a podcast on it. We'll see if she's interested in kind of getting a 2-versus-1 situation. We might have to, if we bring you in on it too, Glenn, we might have to get her like a teammate so she doesn't feel like she's overwhelmed and gonna get attacked.
I could be the neutral party. No, I can't. I can't be a neutral party. I'm too opinionated.
It would also be good to just bring in, like, you know, bring in men like yourself. Well, you, like John, because the single guys like me and Joe, like, I feel like we don't have full credibility to say exactly or talk exactly on this topic because we haven't gone from start to finish on vetting a girl and what, you know, that process. So I think it's good to have married men involved. I
like that question. Dread game from
Dread from a Christian lens.
Yeah, that's a good one.
That's another, like, you married guys got to talk about that.
Yeah.
I don't have a whole lot of opinion.
Single women should not be telling single women how to date. Exactly.
I know. I was actually just looking, so that psychologist chick that's all over the place, Sadie Khan. I'm sure you know who she is. She's just on Chris Williamson talking about dating is a mess. I haven't watched it, but I was trying to find out, is she married? She gives all this advice. You can schedule consults with her, and I'm like, I don't think she's married. So I'm like, where? She has no credentials on
that. You know, it's funny. Like, I hear a bunch of divorced women giving marriage advice, right? And I'm like, no wonder why you're divorced. So you just try to, like, misery loves company. I think a lot of these women are like, yeah, if your man's not doing this and he's this, you just should leave him. Misery loves company, ladies.
Elena, do you know, is Sadie married? Does anyone know? Like, I was trying to figure that out.
If she is, her husband's not proud enough to be, seen with her. Like,
yeah, she doesn't. I should look closely if she's wearing a ring. But it's just, yeah, I always find it. I suppose that's a question for the Catholic Church. Actually, Dave and I were talking about that. Does the Catholic priests who are not married, do they have the credentials to give all this marriage advice and counseling? I'm sure that they have to do.
I don't think so. They've never had to live with a nagging wife. How do they know what it's like?
Maybe they just see it so much that, I don't know. It just seems like it'd be tough. Like, I'm not going to give marriage advice. I don't have any credentials for that. I'll talk about dating stuff, but I remove myself from the marriage conversations.
What do you guys think about people who say biblical marriage is slavery for women?
Oh man.
Oh God. Okay. Again, what they're saying is that it's slavery for women because women have to defer to their husband's authority and he says, hey, this is not appropriate, or I don't like this, right? Or this is not where I think is appropriate, or I want my family to be involved in. They're like, well, that's slavery. It's not slavery. You have the choice to do whatever you want, right? You could do that. The consequences is we probably won't be married.
Yeah, it's an interesting definition of slavery. Like, would you, I guess, working, punching a clock for some business that couldn't give two shits about you and will lay you off in a heartbeat when they, don't have funds. Like, that's not slavery.
When they say it's slavery, it means that if they do something that's against their husband's terms, that they may face a consequence. And then the fact that they have to face a consequence, that's slavery.
Which is bizarre. You do that at work too. Like, if you
show up to work late,
yeah, like
you're
you're
gonna
gonna
get
get fired. I don't know how it's any different. And yet this man who loves you is providing for you a household and like loves doing it, and somehow that's a problem.
Yeah, it's slavery because they don't get to have their cake and eat it too.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, guys, I guess we'll catch you next time.
Yeah,
maybe
we'll
Friday.
wrap it up here. Keep on sending some ideas in the chat. I think the Dread Game one is interesting, but I think we would have to really like break that down before we could do that one. But that's a good one.
Yeah, Dread. We've talked in chat about Dread before, and that one, not being married, like some of it in my head, I'm like, it almost seems like obligated sex as well that comes as a result. Like, oh, she thinks I might leave, so she's yeah. Anyway, that's another topic, but we'll catch you guys later.
All right, peace.